Hey everybody, I'm back with a new podcast episode. It has really been a while since I last recorded one. I think I recorded one in between sometime, but never posted it. And then later on listened to it and decided it wasn't really good enough to post it. I want to talk about a bunch of topics today. If you've been following me for a while, you might have noticed that I kind of disappeared from the face of the earth for several months, not just from my podcast, but also my main channel and my Instagram and basically everything on the internet. Disappearing from the face of the earth might sound a little bit dramatic, but I seriously had someone reach out to me to ask me whether I was dead. Like, if I'm dead, how am I even gonna respond? I didn't really know what to say to that. I don't remember if I responded or not. But I did post on my community board on my main channel that I was taking a break. So I don't know if you were really that concerned. You could have looked there, but it was just a little bit weird. But I mean, that's what happens when you disappear for a while. In a way, I'm glad that people noticed that I was gone. And when I posted my first video when I was back, I got so many comments of people saying that they're glad that I'm back. So thank you to everyone who has shown their support. I really appreciate it. I was so scared that when I come back that my channel would be completely dead. I wanted to start posting again much sooner than would have been good for me, just because I was so scared that my channel would die. And when I finally came back, it really wasn't a big deal. My channel was exactly where I had left it. And I am really appreciative of everybody who has shown their support. So I want to talk a little bit about where I was, why I was gone in the first place, and what I'm doing now. I haven't really hidden the fact that after posting art videos consistently for 6 years, that I hit a block that I just could not overcome by continuing on the path that I was on. But surprisingly, working a lot is not the reason why I burnt out. Personally, I think that when things get a little bit too tough, then art block is probably the first thing that happens to an artist. And if that then gets too intense, it might turn into a full-blown burnout. I know people use the term burnout really loosely. A lot of people just say they're a little bit burnt out, and it's not the same as having a real full burnout. And I don't know if I had the big thing that usually results in people not being able to work for longer periods of time. I think I was somewhere in between that. I just did not have the energy to move on for several more months. And so I actually did a program that helped me with that. And I'm really glad that I did. So, why did I burn out, you ask? I think I finally cracked the code on that question. Unfortunately, I don't like the answer, but I mean, is that a surprise? It's my inner critic, of course. I've been preaching to be kind and gentle to yourself since I think 2018, maybe even earlier than that. But I'm still not immune to perfectionism and to putting too much pressure on myself. When I finally quit my full-time job in 2021 and then also finally had my own art room, something shifted in my brain, and suddenly I felt like I had to kind of prove that I deserved to call myself a professional artist. I did not want that to happen, but I felt the pressure and it was really intense. And that pressure came mostly from myself, honestly. And ever since, part of me felt like I had been standing still, like that part just didn't move anymore. And I really vibed with the song Right Where You Left Me from Taylor Swift because of that. I know it's not about that, it's a breakup song, but the feeling of still being in the same place and time passes and everybody moves on and you're still sitting there and you are not moving, that felt really relatable to me throughout the last few years. And I'm still kind of discovering why that happened and how I can move on, basically. And in addition to having to deal with my own sudden increase of pressure, now I also felt like a fraud because I had been preaching a better mindset. I had been talking about enjoying the artistic process without caring about the end result. And then I couldn't really live up to my own teachings, and then that created obviously even more frustration. So I then also became increasingly critical of myself. I went back, I started to archive old videos that I now looked at and thought they were cringe. I judged art pieces as not good enough, and basically, I wanted to be everything that I was not. I wanted to be focused on specific topics. I wanted to have a consistent art style and only use one art medium, stuff like that. Things that I had in my mind where I thought this is what real artists do, what professional artists do. And yeah, I know that all sounds a little bit intense, maybe, and not fun at all. Yeah, it really wasn't. I really, really wanted it to be different, but I was so deep into that own self-judgment and all of the rigid rules that I had that I didn't really know what else to do. I felt like now I had to live up to being this professional artist. Now I had to consistently create finished and good art pieces, consistently prove that I am good enough and that my content is good enough. And there were just so much high standards that I set for myself, and nobody was there telling me that I'm not good enough. That was just me, because up until that point, I had really prided myself or had fun with just playing around. And I also wanted to teach other people to enjoy art by just playing around with it. And it doesn't have to look good, and it doesn't even have to be a good idea or anything. You can do the same thing over and over again, or just use your colors in fun ways. And it really doesn't have to be so serious. That was what I wanted to do. And then suddenly, because I now wanted to make a living with my art and call myself a professional artist, whatever that means, now I felt like people would come at me and say, how are you doing that? How are you a professional artist? Like, your art, they're just doodles and stuff in your sketchbook that you're playing around with. And then I also had this probably a little bit more rational or healthier part in my brain that was like, I just want to do more finished art pieces for me, so I know that I can do it, and because I want to put my own ideas into pieces that are interesting and a little bit more intricate. That part was good, but then it kind of shifted over into I have to do that, and all of my art now has to be good. And now at this point where I'm at right now, I know that the right path for me is, most likely it is, I allow myself to create these more finished art pieces so I can feel, just for my ego, like a real artist. And also because I want to put my ideas into pieces that I'm proud of. Like, I don't want to never do that. This is part of it. But then I also want to create those fun doodles that don't have to be perfect, that don't have to look good. They can look like a toddler did them, and it doesn't matter because it's part of the creative process. I'm getting so much closer to having this as my mindset now again. When I was in that frame of mind where everything was so rigid, at some point, I mean, I noticed that I was doing that and that it wasn't good for me. So at some point, I just couldn't continue on the way that I had been doing that. Like, my mind was not a fun place to be when it came to that. And so I did a burnout rehab program that was 6 weeks. It was not like where you go to a hospital or something. It was just going there for a few hours a day and attending several types of therapy and programs. They talked about a lot of things, and all of the other people there were also people who had burned out, and they were literally from all walks of life. They were all different ages and different backgrounds, different jobs, creative people, self-employed people, but also people who had been employed, a lot of people that worked in the health sector, which is not really that surprising because it's just very demanding and not appreciated enough. We all know that. But there were so many people. At first, I thought I would be by far the youngest person at age 28 there, but I really wasn't. There were several people who were my own age or even younger. So a lot of people are there. And in the end, I learned to not be ashamed of the fact that had to. I didn't have to. Nobody forced me, but I felt like I had to go there. And there's still a lot of stigma when it comes to these things, but I am getting much better at dealing with that. And also the fact that I do have ADHD, and I know that I have probably a higher risk of overworking myself and burning out due to that, because things that might be simple for somebody else, they're really hard for me, and they take a lot more energy, a lot more motivation and drive. For me, it might be harder to brush my teeth than, I don't know, recording a course, an art course. I don't know, stuff that is really easy for other people may be really hard for me, and vice versa. Also, I am now acknowledging that there's stuff that is really easy for me or doable when it isn't for other people. I know a lot of people that would not be able to do what I'm doing, that would not have the skills, but also they wouldn't have the persistence, maybe wouldn't have the creativity. So I do have a lot of skills that maybe other people don't, and they have skills that I maybe don't. So while I am having a hard time sometimes with dealing with boring chores around the house or stuff like that, I do have stuff that I'm really good at. And I somewhat recently listened to a podcast where they said that you can't have both, basically. How are we supposed to be so creative and have so many ideas and do all of that and also be really good at the mundane, boring, everyday tasks and just having our life together in all areas? It's not reasonable. You can't do perfectly well in every area of your life. And all of these things were things that I knew half a year ago before I took a break. Like, rationally, we know these things, but it has to really sink in, and you have to, I mean, it doesn't have to, but in order for you to really understand it, it's gonna have to sink in on a more visceral level, and you're gonna have to understand it on a more deeper level. And I know that there's a really big difference with me with learning something or knowing something rationally and then really, really understanding it on a deeper level. And there's so many things that I am now understanding on that deeper level that I wasn't able to just a few years ago or even a few months ago. And I learned so many things from all this time and from just working on myself. And I know I'm still at risk of overworking myself, or, I mean, it wasn't really that I was working too much. It was how I was working. Like I said, the key is my inner critic, the fact that I'm putting pressure on myself. I think I could probably be working like 8 hours without a pause and not burn out from that day. If it was a really fun day and in the end I'm really proud and then I recharge. Or I could burn myself out from just working for 3 hours, but then beating myself up over how all of the stuff that I didn't do wasn't good enough. That costs me so much energy, and that's what happened there. And I think this is a really big deal for artists because it starts really slowly, creeps up slowly, and you are creating an art piece and you might just have a really rational and healthy thinking and approach where you're questioning, what could I improve, how can I make this piece better, and then it suddenly shifts over into, this is not good enough, what I'm doing isn't good enough, it didn't turn out like I wanted it to, it never does. And it can easily spiral downwards, and it can come from a healthy approach but then shift over too much. And I think that this is basically where art block comes from. You create something and then you're dissatisfied with it. It just isn't what you wanted and you're just not happy with it, even though you might not even admit it to yourself. I was in this stage where I was so deep into that, I don't think I even admitted that I was so harsh on myself because I didn't want to. So that made it even worse. It's such a spiral. You criticize yourself and then you criticize yourself for criticizing yourself, which absolutely does not help. And you can then go ahead and criticize yourself for criticizing yourself for criticizing yourself. Like that can go on forever, and it will. I have now realized that criticizing myself for being hard on myself is not the solution. And from every point, I can just say, how can I be kinder to myself right now? How can I be gentle to myself right now in this moment? It doesn't matter what I just did or what I did yesterday or what I'm going to do tomorrow. How can I do it now and show some kindness to myself now? And how can I kind of make that inner critic shut up a little bit more, or how can I learn to ignore it a little bit more? And right now my approach is to post as much as I can, to create as much as I can, and then criticize it as little as I can. So if I create and post a video and then I go ahead one day later, I post a short video, then the long form video that I had posted the day prior, it isn't the first thing anymore that I see when I go to my analytics. So I am not so focused on how well that video did because I have already posted the next one. So while posting more kind of seems counterintuitive when I'm trying to recover from burnout, I think it does help me because when I'm going at a faster pace, I don't really have the time to criticize every single thing that I did with the last thing. And also, I don't know how the stuff that I'm gonna do is gonna perform in the future. I had a video where I was really unsure of whether I should post it because I thought it wasn't so good. It was a short video, so I didn't put that much effort into it compared to a longer form video. It was just cut up snippets of the long video, and I was sure it wouldn't do well, but I posted it anyways, and next day it has 6,000 views, which is pretty good for a short video in that amount of time for me. So I don't know how stuff is gonna do. So even if I do judge this stuff, my judgment isn't always correct. So yeah, if you're a Swiftie, you will know that her most recent album, The Tortured Poets Department, has 31 songs. And when she first released it, I was a little bit overwhelmed with the amount of songs, but I'm never gonna complain about too many songs from Taylor. So I ask myself the question whether I think that she absolutely loves every single one of these songs and thinks that they're all perfect. And I cannot imagine that she would. Like, I'm sure she has very good self-confidence, or at least she knows how to deal with her inner critic. But I'm sure there's songs on that album that she doesn't love as much. But she decided to publish all of those. And throughout the last years, when she did a re-recording of the past albums, we always got vault tracks that are literally songs that weren't good enough to go on the album for whatever reason back when the album first came out. And people have been loving those songs. There's so many wall tracks that I really, really like. And even the ones that I don't like, I'm so glad that she's publishing all of those, because I'm sure there's so many songs that I don't like that are another person's favorite for some reason. So who are we to judge whether something is good enough or not? The best approach, I think, is to just put it all out there. I mean, I'm sure she wrote more than 31 songs, so maybe don't publish every single thing you make, but for the most part, I'm trying to take the approach to publish the vast majority of things that I create and trying not to question it too much. And every single time when I hit publish, there is this voice in my head that tells me, do you think that this is good enough? Do you think that this is reasonable to post? And then I get this really nervous and tight feeling in my chest because I get really scared and anxious. And then I say, it doesn't matter, I'm gonna post it. Then I hit publish and I live for another day. Like, it's not that serious. It doesn't matter if it's good or not. I'm really trying to remind myself of that. Art is not that serious. I am taking the fact that I'm creating art seriously. I want to seriously create art a lot, but I don't want to be serious when it comes to whether the art is good. I don't want to judge it like that. So now I do have a sketchbook that is kind of my ugly sketchbook that I use mostly off camera, where I just doodle around, find ideas, and it doesn't matter if it looks good. And also the pieces that I do create on camera that I'm not completely happy with, I allow myself to put them out into the world anyways, even though I might think that they're not quote unquote good enough. Because who am I to judge? I really hope that you got something out of this episode. I'm looking forward to hopefully recording more of these in the future. We will see if my inner critic lets me do that, lets me record them and then publish them. I will try my best, and I will hopefully see you again next time. Goodbye.